Hello, everyone. This is the Free American Press with your host, Alexander. And today we're having a very special guest back on the show, and that's Joseph P. Farrell. Hello, Joseph. How are
Uh,
you?
Doing good, Alex. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the whole Israel conflict. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on there, Joseph.
Well, I don't think anybody can be a normal human being and not react to what was allegedly done to the Israelis. And by the same token, I don't think you can be a normal human being and react to what now the Palestinians are going through without a degree of horror and revulsion. Is just my problem, Alex. Setting all that aside, um, my problem is the timing of this. To me, it just there's something about the narrative here that is very fishy. Um, and I even just blogged, as a matter of fact, yesterday, about an article that appeared in 2009 on Global Research News that indicated that there were massive amounts of natural gas deposits off the coast of Israel and the Gaza Strip. So, again, follow the money.
Right.
But beyond that, um, the timing of this, Alex, bothers me immensely from so many different points of view. Um, this misadministration, and I'm being kind here. I don't want to drive off your listenership by using the kind of language I really reserve for the Biden Joe, as I like to call it,
Right.
misadministration. Their whole effort, and for that matter, the efforts of Mr. Global Looney, in toto in the Ukraine were falling apart and have fallen apart. Um, the Ukraine was never going to win that war, and it wasn't even a good enough proxy to prosecute any sort of long sustained war against Russia. I mean, that idea is just nuts. Where they came up with that. It see Napoleon, Adolf Hitler, and others that have
Yeah.
tried that stunt. The only one that got away with it was Kaiser Wilhelm, and he had help from Austria-Hungary. So anyway, um, that whole narrative has fallen apart. And interestingly enough, now that this Israel Gaza thing is in the news, we're not hearing a word or a peep about the Ukraine, and it's kind of interesting to me to see how quickly that's been shuffled off of center stage. And Zelensky's got to be thinking, now we've got a war in Israel, so all that money is going to be laundered through Israel and not through the Ukraine. And notice I said laundered because that's pretty much what I think is happening with all that money that was sent to the Ukraine. And in addition, um, Russia's been pointing out that a lot of the weapons that were supposed to be going to the Ukraine ended up in the hands of Hamas and had been recovered by the Israelis. So, know,
Yeah, it seems like I've been hearing like stuff that the United States gave Iran some money
yeah.
and they use that for these people who done all these attacks.
Well, that's the claim. The Biden Joe misadministration unfroze a lot of Iranian money that had been sitting in Western banks for a very long time. And they unfroze it with the promise from the Iranians that they wouldn't use it for any nasty stuff like building atomic bombs or creating acts of terrorism.
Right.
But uh that in itself is just an insane policy as far as I'm concerned. You don't, that regime is in trouble anyway. So
Yeah.
the last thing you want to do is give it a lot of money so that it can keep fomenting trouble.
Yeah, it seems odd to me because even if it was to be used for humanitarian purposes or stuff,
Yeah,
that still allows them to use their other money that they're
sure.
spending on that for.
Well, yeah, and so that's part of the timing that bothers me. The other part of the timing that bothers me about this is that it occurs right when the United States Speaker of the House is up for grabs. And of course, it also occurs on an anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, which, I'm old enough to remember all of that fiasco. Um, but the thing that bothers me about it occurring right at the point of the Speaker of the House, and now we've got Biden Joe on his way to Israel as we speak.
Right.
And I'm thinking, talk about a colossal trap, because if something were to happen to the president while he's over there, then that pretty much leaves the government open, God perish the thought, to Kamala Harris taking over the office of the presidency and no one in the speakership of the House of Representatives. So talk about a perfect time for the people that run the continuity of government operations in this country to step in and say, oh, no, can't have elections. We're declaring continuity of government a national emergency. Everything's locked down. You're under martial law,
Right.
So there's no way I look at any of this as a good thing. The whole narrative is just too suspicious of me. And to be quite frank with you, I know that we're hearing um, all sorts of barbaric and gruesome things that were done during this attack. I do not doubt that some of those allegations are true, because if you're creating a scenario that's deliberately designed, as this one looks to be to me, deliberately designed to get people riled up and angry, then you have to make them emotional. You have to make them turn off their reason, and atrocities are the way to do it. This is an old technique. That said, um, there are already out there, as I'm sure you're aware, Alex, stories about some of these pictures and so on having been photoshopped and faked and so on. And quite frankly, I don't doubt that either. The bottom line that I think we in this country have to get through our thick heads is we have been too easy to stampede into these wars, and then later we find out that it was all a made up lie and a narrative. I'm thinking of the Bush misadministration and the lie about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. At least there were no weapons of mass destruction of the sort that we were being publicly led to believe were there. So
So
I'm looking at all of this with uh, a very skeptical eye. Let's put it that way.
So do you think this is planned to become a much larger conflict than it is? Because as it stands right now, it seems like they're doing a big deportations of, a lot of people in the area, like a lot of
Well,
movements of people now.
yeah, this is the other thing that just makes no sense to me. Israel has it makes no sense from so many points of view. Israel has gone into the Gaza Strip before on punitive raids after these sort of attacks have occurred. Now it would appear that the Israeli government has taken the decision that we've got to get rid of Hamas once and for all, and supposedly they're going in to do that. Um, Here's my problem with what they've done. They announced to approximately 1 million Palestinian citizens inside of Gaza that they've got to get out, and they have a certain amount of time to get out. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know where you live, but that would be like the Israeli government telling the city where I live, which has a metropolitan population of about 1 million people. All of a sudden, you've got 24 hours to get out of your city and go somewhere else. So that's called a mass deportation.
Yeah.
And I thought that went out with offshore Bonnerpal, but to to go way back. But my problem with that is presumably the Israelis are doing this because they do not want to create conditions for massive amounts of civilian casualties. So if that's the goal here, it's a laudable goal. However, the other thing it does is if you're telling 1 million people to get out of a certain area that you're going to be going into, then who's to say that the Hamas people themselves are not going to be part of the people fleeing with the civilian population and getting out of, the very people that are your targets of your operation. So this makes no sense to me from a purely military point of view. It's like telling the mafia bosses, "We're coming after you. You'd better leave."
Yeah.
You know? Um, it makes no sense from that point of view. Um, so there's a lot here that bothers me about this, and again, the narrative makes no sense. So, in answer to your question, could they be trying to gin up support for a regional war? I don't know. I can tell you this: when Senator Lindsey Graham Cracker, as I like to call him, went on. I mean, this man is nuts. He spent too long with John McInsane, but um, when Senator Graham went on TV and said, I think something to the effect that Israel needs to bring this home to the Ayatollah's backyard." In other words, Israel needs to go to war with Iran on top of everything else. Um, I just thought, number one, dude, you're nuts. Iran is not the Palestinian organization. Iran is a whole different ball of wax altogether.
Yeah.
For one thing, it's a big country. For another thing, it's a technologically sophisticated country that you don't want to mess around with without thinking twice about it. So just the Babylon Bee came out with a satire article about Lindsey Graham, and the article said Lindsey Graham says the United States must bomb the entire world. Which
Yeah.
which seems to be his approach to everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that there is a group, Alex, among Mr. Global Looney's factions that would love dearly to see this expand into a regional war. I really do. It gives them an excuse to crack down, and it also misdirects people's attention from all of their financial crimes and misdemeanors and everything else that they've got going on. So yeah, I think there's a faction that wants to see that happen.
So do you think that's likely to happen or more unlikely?
Well, sadly to say that the people running the West are, I think, to be quite frank with you, Alex, I think the people running the West are criminally insane, criminally, pathologically insane. So, under those conditions, anything is possible. Um, I certainly hope not, because once anyone throws the war dice, the old saying is, uh, perfect war plans survive just as long as contact with the enemy. In other words, the moment that you start the war, everything goes out the window.
Yeah.
So I hope not, but Israel has already kind of been intimating that they were going to go into Gaza, but now they're kind of holding back because they're afraid that Hezbollah up in Lebanon might start something if they do. So, who knows? Um, this, the bottom line is this could blow up quite literally real fast. And the other thing that bothers me, Alex, is we in America tend to think of World War III as a civilization ending nuclear war. Everybody launches their missiles, obliterates each other, and leaves us bouncing rubble, with the next missile strike. That really is an image of World War III from the 50s and 60s. It's kind of Stanley Kubrick's Doctor Strangelove situation. The problem with that view is that strategic weaponry has improved dramatically since then. So it's no longer necessary for Russia to drop, a 30 megaton hydrogen bomb over Manhattan to get rid of New York City.
Yeah.
They can do it with much more precision weapons. That in and given the nature of modern precision guided weapons, they don't even need to be nuclear anymore. So I think you're looking at a situation where the technology has so vastly improved that it's a temptation for Mr. Global only to say, okay, let's take out Vladimir Putin. Those drone strikes that you saw going on inside of Russia were messages to the Russians that, we know where you live and
Yeah.
we can drop a drone on your heads. Well, the Russians can do the very same thing, and they have telling us about that they have the capability of horizontal escalation. And Dmitry Medvedev, in almost these words, came right out and said, and we know where you live. In other words, we can drop drones on your head too. And if you want to go there, we're perfectly willing.
It's a
So, yeah,
tit for tat.
it's a tit for tat scenario. And, this is what Americans have to get through their heads. World War III does not necessarily mean an all-out thermonuclear war. In fact, it probably means the opposite, that you're going to have a series of uh, tremendously destructive, vicious regional conflicts all over. It'll be kind of like an updated technological version of the 30 Years' War back in the 1600s. So that's what I think we're facing, and that's why I'm quite frankly, I'm really worried about this situation in Gaza and in Israel. I really am. I don't see sanity being exercised by the leadership anywhere on either side.
Yeah, and it seems to be like opening up like a second front. Like
Mhm.
you said, they're going to be giving a lot more money to Israel and Ukraine, but they
Yeah.
start giving money to both of them, it could like bankrupt the United States.
Well, we're already bankrupt. I mean,
Right.
that we passed that that weather bell a long time ago. Um, what is holding this financial system together, I think, is twine and duct tape at this point. It makes no sense. And the thing that tells me that is if you look at the amount of gold purchasing that central banks and local and regional banks are doing right now, it's off the chart. Well, why do you do that? You do that particularly when the political and geopolitical situation is such that you think you might have to do a lot of deficit financing in case of a war. So what do? You grab all the gold and specie that you can. And that's what I see them doing.
And do you think oil's probably going to go up as a result of this war?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense because of all those Middle Eastern countries. Yeah, it seems like pretty crazy if it gets to a bigger war and the United States is even sending a lot of its Navy ships out there. And that's
Well, there's the other problem this country has. We have been designing and purchasing a military that's designed to fight and lose long wars against countries that are no threat to us. In other words, our military is designed to show the flag and bomb countries like Vietnam or Pakistan or Afghanistan, whatever little country is in the crosshairs at the moment. That's what our military is designed to do. Our military is not designed to confront major powers like Russia or China, or for that matter, Iran. Case in point, we boast that we have the largest aircraft carrier in fleet in the world. You know what aircraft carriers are?
yeah,
They're missile magnets.
yeah, they
That's
can.
what they are. You know, in today's modern technological warfare world, those things are just great big targets for hypersonic Russian cruise missiles. And you know, I wouldn't want to be on an aircraft carrier facing down those things. Not, no way.
So they're
No
really
way.
good for small conventional type wars against countries who don't have
Right,
missile
right,
power, stuff like
right.
that.
Let me put it this way. Would you want to send this woke military that's concerned about what pronouns and what bathrooms they're using? Would you want to send that military up against the Russians?
Well, I wouldn't want any war to begin with.
Well, yeah, that's again, that's true. But my point is if you're building a military that's more concerned with social engineering than with tactics, strategy, and operational doctrine, um, again, my money's not on this military. I'm sorry, no, no. Um, we have this feeling in this country that we're the best and brightest, and whatever we put our mind to, we're automatically going to win, and that applies to our military. Well, for crying out loud, it took the Union 4 years to put down a bunch of farmers and plantation owners in the Confederacy.
Yeah, it wasn't
it
easy.
wasn't it wasn't a picnic. So I look at this military and just just the enormous expenditure of some of these weapon systems like the F-35, which, if you are following the reports about that system, it's not really the best plane out there. um and it costs an enormous amount of money. So foreign countries are more interested in purchasing, what's now a decades old technology in the F-16. So again, what are we getting for all of this vast amount of money that we're lavishing on the military industrial complex? We're getting a very expensive military that's woke, that may not prove capable, and in my opinion probably won't prove capable of going up against a country that has consistently been modernizing its military forces, like Russia. We think that because the Soviet Union disappeared, that Russia all of a sudden gave up, you know, researching, weapons technology, which they certainly did not give that up. So, here we are with Biden, Joe in the White House, who can't finish a sentence or a complete thought, and we're staring down the barrel of a potential major regional conflict. It couldn't get much worse.
It's just crazy because all that money, imagine if they used it on like the actual United States,
Yeah,
infrastructure and stuff.
exactly. Why are we concerned about the Ukraine's borders and not our own?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
definitely agree with that. I
no.
think the whole thing, like Ukraine can defend itself, if they want to stop, the
Well, the Ukraine is the Ukraine never stood a chance in that war, and the American media was so complicit in putting out just a bunch of hope porn in terms of the narrative that it was putting out about the Ukraine. There was no way that that was going to end up any differently than it has. Um, I'm kind of surprised that Mr. Putin has exercised the restraint that he has, and I know why he's been doing it. And it's a very simple calculus that he's following. Russia does not want the headache nor the expense of militarily occupying that whole country. They just don't want it. But by the same token, they don't want NATO bases there either.
Right.
So, they're in a difficult position. How do we impose a political solution on the Ukraine that's going to keep it neutral and keep the NATO bases out of the Ukraine?
It just seems like everything would be better if everybody got along a little bit
Oh,
better
of course it would.
rather than all this
But but I don't know if you've studied the history of World War One in
yes.
any detail. Well, if you have, then you'll know that that region of the world is just a hotbed of religious, cultural, political conflicts that go back at least a century. The Ukraine was carved out by the Central Powers when the Russians surrendered at the end of World War One to them. Well, the Central Powers carved the Ukraine out as a puppet state, and you had Austrian and German troops in Kiev as occupying forces um, to make that a so-called independent state. Well, here we are again. And that's essentially what Angela Merkel admitted about the Minsk Accords. Oh, it was just necessary to give the Ukrainians time to build up their forces. What she's not saying is, oh, and by the way, we were kind of hoping to have a few German military bases in the country, but you know, so nothing changes. And I wish people in this country had a historical perspective on some of this, because they would realize that we have no business there. We can't keep our own borders shut, much less supply a country on the other side of the world with maybe at best a fifth of the population of Russia, and keep it militarily supplied well enough to keep the Russians in check. This is a logistical supply nightmare.
Yeah. So
You
it's so
know?
far away, and now Poland was talking about that it was going to stop giving aid, but now it says like some leftist government one, so I don't know what's going to go.
Well, the look, the Poles are not stupid. And given their history, I mean, you're dealing with a country that's located between Russia and Germany, which is not the best place to be in terms of European geopolitics. But the Poles had that war between World War One and World War Two, where quite literally they marched their forces all the way to Kiev, and they were marched all the way back to to Warsaw by the Russians. There's a whole history there that people in this country are just not aware of.
Yeah.
That they went to war with Russia once before, and it ended up in kind of a stalemate. The Poles are not stupid. They don't, they may talk a big game about supporting the Ukraine, but when push comes to shove, they know that they are certainly not in any condition to take on the Russians, especially with our help. And please note my words, especially with our help. If you're a Pole and you're looking at a woke military like this country is trying to field right now, and a track record in the 20th century of wars that it has not won, that has left the countries involved devastated economically, would you want the United States as an ally?
No, I think,
No.
and historically too, last time World War II, I think England didn't even help, or all these other countries when Germany and Russia was carving it up.
Well, England and France gave that guarantee to Poland
Yeah.
in the summer of 1939 that, okay, if evil bad Dolph attacks your country, we're right there to help you.
Yeah.
And of course, wait a minute, just look at the map. England and France are on the other side of Germany and are in no position to help Poland. You're on your own, dudes. If you're, especially with Hitler and Stalin signing that non-aggression pact. Well, guess who that's aimed at? You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So again, the idea that a Western guarantee is going to help Poland, no. They've been down that road too, you know.
It seems
Uh
history could repeat itself,
sure.
a lot of these conflicts,
Oh,
especially.
absolutely. I've been saying that for 10 years. When the United States, when Germany was reunified, I made a little prediction. This was years ago, and I said, watch, the United States is going to slowly shift all of its bases out of Central Europe and into Eastern Europe. And what we're going to be doing that is we're going to be taking over the role of the old cordon sanitaire, was what it was called. And this was basically the brainchild of Clemenceau and the French governments after World War One, that in addition to creating a demilitarized zone inside of Germany in the West, they were going to create a system of alliances beginning with the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, Czechoslovakia, and kind of squeeze in Germany and the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe.
Right.
And everything was going to be hunky dory. Well, you know, the ink, Alex, the ink was not dry on the signatures of the German delegates to the Treaty of Versailles. The ink was not even dry when Germany and the Soviet Union in 1922 concluded the Rapallo Pact. Now, most people don't even know about that pact, but that pact was an economic assistance pact between Germany and the Soviet Union, and it had secret codicils in it that, in return for the Germans building a bunch of armament factories, which they weren't supposed to be doing inside the Soviet Union, that they could produce all of the weapons in the Soviet Union that they weren't supposed to have, and train their officer corps along with the Russians inside of Russia on secret Russian military reservations, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's
So, Germany started rearming right out of the gate.